So if you've watched any of my texturing or shading videos, you already know where to go to find some textures for whatever it is that you're doing. In this case, I'm going to Polygon and I decided on this Marble 66. It doesn't necessarily have to look exactly like tectonic plates, but we can use this texture, modify it, and get something similar to serve our purposes. So Marble 66, downloaded it right here to the textures folder. And if we go to regular, I did just a 3K for this, and we open up Photoshop, let's bring that in and adjust some of our settings. So drag that over. And what we need out of this is a black and white mask, which clearly defines what is a tectonic plate and what is not. So I'm going to bring this over here so you can see what I'm doing. Let's start off by creating, let's say, some levels. And I want to clip the whites and I want to clip the blacks so that we're taking away the gray values in this image. So we start off with something like that. And let's also go to adjustments and get rid of any saturation that's in the image. So if we go here, I believe we can just go actually to our layers, background, and we want to adjust this. So adjust, saturation, take that down. Now we're just black and white. Okay, so we're going to start with that. Then let's also go ahead and try to get this over. There we go. And try to get rid of those gray values even more. So we end up maybe with something right about there. Okay, let's go ahead and take this. I found it helps to blur this out a little bit. So let's go ahead and use a Gaussian blur. And we'll go maybe right about there with it. Let's go ahead and copy all this and merge it together. And we'll do another blur. Like that. And then go back to our levels. And once again, clip out some of our whites and blacks. So we're just, again, getting rid of those gray values so that there's really not a whole lot of guesswork when this goes to figure out where tectonic plates are. Okay, so we have that. That's cool. Let's do some manual painting now. Press B for brush, and I'm going to hold down Alt and right mouse to paint away some of this stuff. Now, the idea here is that we want to make some islands. So all these tiny little specks, let's get rid of those, and we just want to, again, focus on big shapes here. So this is going to take a little bit of time to go through here, but it's really not all that bad. I know it's not 100% procedural at this point, but that's okay. Not everything needs to be procedural. What I will say, though, is go down to the brushes here and just find a brush that's a little bit different than usual. Don't just go with the default brushes that Photoshop comes with. It's good to find something that's a little bit more custom. So in this case, I've already downloaded some brushes in my Photoshop ahead of time, but just use something besides the default brushes when you do this. Now, as I paint this out, let's talk real quick about why I'm doing this particular method. Because in a lot of situations, you might think just to take some grids, right, some planes, and then just add a mountain to it, and then use that to create the shapes of the big islands here. And you might also make the argument that by doing that, we have a fully procedural setup. But there's an advantage to doing this particular method with the texture map, and it's this. The shapes that we have from this texture maps are not something that you can get very easily anyway by trying to use a grid in a mountain sop. You can get something that maybe is about 60% of the randomness that we have right here, but by using something that's photographically based, it's going to be something that has a lot of randomization already built into it. In other words, you can't get more random than nature. Nature has these shapes that you just can't really make up on your own, and because of that, we're going to take advantage of that to give interesting large shapes to these fractures. Okay, and after not too long, probably about 10 minutes or so, we now have something like this. And this is great because I've essentially separated out all these different chunks into islands they're not really like connected to each other all that much anymore. So be sure that you really separate them out, kind of like this. Now I have one island here, one island here. And by doing that, we're good to go. Save as, PNG. And I'm going to go to textures, overwrite that, and save this as a smallest file size, PNG. So now in Houdini, let me give you a brief tour of the scene and what's going on. All the lights I use with Redshift are up here. And then I have a couple of these lights here to make the viewport look pretty as I teach. But these don't actually get rendered. So that's what's going on with lights. The geo right here is just the basic geo that I bring in initially. And then all of these nodes right here are basically everything separated out. So we got the main gates, the stairs, spikes, etc., all kind of sectioned out, and I've set it as this build suffix right here, so that if we have, let's say, a destruction effect on the gates, we can do all that in this network, and then when we go to render, we'll just have a separate network that we bring our results into. So that's very common practice, by the way. You build in one of these nodes, and then you render by collecting the results elsewhere. I actually don't have the rendered nodes made yet, but you might see it in your file. Anyway, what we're going to be doing in this course is focusing on the ground fissure. So that's this grid right here. And this grid is also separated out from the backdrop right here. I wanted that to be something separate. And just because our camera doesn't see anything over here, it doesn't really matter. Okay. So, start this off by creating a trace SOP. We'll bring in that image. So hip, textures, primary form mask 2K. And boom, there we go. Got some sweet geo happening now. But we need to resample this. So, resample, turn on these points, and turn down the length here to 0.005. So that we resample these edges to have evenly spaced points. Once we do that, let's also go ahead and just blast away some stuff we don't need. So I found probably the best way of doing this is just manually selecting all the big pieces that you want and just avoiding anything that's small and doesn't really matter. So again, primary shapes. So big shapes are what we're after here. That's what we're defining. Okay, this doesn't take too long, but once we have that, look at all that geo we just cleaned up. It's a lot. Delete non-selected, and we're good to go. In the next video, we're going to Boolean out that ground plane and also add some detail to the shapes of what we have right here.